Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for another great evening for coming out to the House Committee on Finance. Tonight, we're going to go back into the proposed budget to some degree with a briefing with Sharon and her staff. But before that, would you please call the roll, Mr. Clerk?
Chairman Abney,
Present.
Vice Chair Slater, Vice Chair Mazukowski,
Present.
Representative Amore,
Present.
Representative Baginski,
Present.
Representative Barrows,
Present.
Representative Diaz, Representative Edwards,
Present.
Representative Hull, Representative Nadone, Representative O'Brien, Representative Quattrucci,
Present.
Representative Ruggiero,
Present.
Representative Tabone, Representative Ella Wilkinson,
Here.
and Leader Filippi.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The next order of business before we get started will be, we do have a bill, Bill 5204. For further study. I think you have to call a roll again on
We
that
do,
one.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
Chairman Abney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Slater, Vice Chair Mazukowski,
Yes.
Representative Amore,
Yes.
Representative Baginski,
Yes.
Representative Barrows,
Yes.
Representative Diaz, Representative Edwards,
Yes.
Representative Hull, Representative Nadone. Wait, I'm sorry. Yeah. Representative O'Brien, Representative Quattrucci,
Yes.
Representative Ruggiero,
Yes.
and Representative Diaz. Yes. Okay, we are good. Hey, how are you?
We have it's okay. Okay, thank you. So that bill 5204 will be held for further study. So the way we'll conduct business tonight is that this is another one of our briefings that Sharon and her staff will give us on part of the budget. After which we will introduce a bill, and then we will have the administration here to answer any questions that any of you may have, or to just further explain what the articles are. So without further ado, we'll start with Sharon and her crew, please.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Your agenda this evening includes several articles as well as an item that's included in a technical fix submitted by the governor to line up with something already in the budget. We will start with Article 8 as the rest of the items kind of go together in terms of them being more environmental items. So Article 8 deals with the Public Utilities Commission, which, as a reminder, we call the Public Utilities Commission by that name, but it is a single agency with two distinct regulatory bodies. One is the commission itself, a quasi-judicial tribunal, and they hold the hearings involving rates, tariffs, tolls, and utility charges. Then there's the division, which must enforce the commission's rules and regulations. So Article 8 establishes an emergency response reporting requirement regarding significant or widespread outages, service interruptions. It would be due on May 15th, 2022, and annually thereafter. It also requires companies to establish standards of utility restoration, which would be subject to review by the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers. This applies to electric and gas distributors. Right now, there's no current standards or law in place for requiring specific preparation for a major utility outage, such as the one that occurred on Aquidneck Island with the natural gas outage in 2019. The division can review a company's actions after an incident, but this is more proactive. Article 8 also imposes some penalties: failure to file an emergency response plan, $500 a day if there's no filing. Also establishes fines for violations of standards, and that the penalties assessed will be credited back to the company's customers. The bill you just held for further study, House Bill 5204, is an exact duplicate of Article 8. Moving on to Article 6. This is a component of Article 6, which we've already heard pieces of on Tuesday, and this deals with a couple of sections with respect to the Department of Environmental Management, which is responsible for managing the state's beaches, parks, and recreation areas at 31 state-owned facilities. DEM is allowed to charge user fees for services and facilities, examples being the parking at the beaches, pavilion rentals, etc. This is all done through a regulatory process. What Section 6 does is it allows DEM to increase fees for facilities located in Westerly. You may recall that the 2019 Assembly froze fees at the current level they're at through October 2021. This establishes a carve-out for just facilities in Westerly. The budget assumes about $600,000 in new general revenues from proposed changes to weekday and weekend beach passes parking only. The numbers assume that these regulations would be promulgated and take effect by July 1st. The initial information we received from the department on the proposals are shown here. Obviously, these are not in the article itself, but these are the figures that were used to develop the estimate, but this would be subject to the regulatory process. Misquamicut State Beach is the beach that is in Westerly and has the highest percentage of out-of-state visitors in the last 3 years. Parking fees are the same regardless of the state beach. If this were to pass, there would be that carve-out for Westerly, the ability to do that carve-out for Westerly. And then within DEM's budget, there is an offsetting expenditure to pay Westerly its share of increased daily parking fees if this is introduced, because they get a proportion of that. All host communities do. So increased fees means an increased payment to Westerly. Moving on to another section of Article 6 with respect to Coastal Resources Management Council. This is the state agency responsible for preservation, protection, development, and restoration of coastal areas in the state. General law allows the council to assess administrative and criminal penalties. This table summarizes the penalties, current and proposed. We note that the administrative penalties were last increased in 2004. They have not generated a significant amount of money, and in fact, in the last few years, it's been less than $7,000. The budget assumes $15,000 from new general revenues. The criminal penalties are unchanged from their establishment in the late 80s. The article also contains a provision to change the de novo standard of legal review. This refers to the deference given by the Superior Court in reviewing decisions by the council and assessing administrative penalties, essentially meaning the appellate would not get a new trial in Superior Court, would rather have the findings of the CRMC reviewed. Moving on to Article 7. This deals with changes to registration fees. Well, there's just a number of fees, as a matter of fact, and we'll go through them. They're listed here, and we'll go through them in turn. The Division of Agriculture of DEM is responsible for registering agricultural products brought into the state. Manufacturers and distributors must register their products. There are a number of these types of products: fertilizers, feeds, materials, soil amendments, and pesticides. The proposal here, contained in sections 1, 2, and 5, would raise the commercial fertilizer, commercial feed, and pesticide product registration fees, as shown on this table here. Also provided are comparable fees for Massachusetts and Connecticut, as well as the year the fee was last increased, for your information. All told, this is estimated to generate $1.4 million in general revenues. Moving on to fees through the Division of Fish and Wildlife. This division is responsible for administering a fish and wildlife program, including season size limits, methods of taking in daily limits, and also controls fishing, hunting, license, and permits. Article 3 repeals the provision that season and bag limits can only be effective for 1 year. This was actually proposed last year and not among any of the changes that made it into the budget. Right now, there's a law that says that any season and bag limits can only be effective for 1 year. If this were to pass, that they could be, the rules and regs could be promulgated to last longer than a year. Section 4 deals with increases to fees. These are all the same fee proposal increases that you heard last year. They're regarding hunting, fishing, and combination licenses. There would be a series of fee increases that would take place over a number of years. These were last increased in 2002. These fee collections are used as state match for federal fish and wildlife funds. We've provided, as we did last year, some examples of license and permit fee increases because there are many, which we also made available to you on a more comprehensive side sheet, which has some stuff on the fishing as well, which we'll get to. But we did a handout in case you have a specific interest in what the proposal is. But so here are the resident permit license and fees, an example of those, as well as the non-resident ones, containing information on the regional average, etc. The next item deals with commercial fishing modernization, and there are a few items to discuss here. The first section refers to party and charter vessels. The party and charter vessels are those that take passengers on state waters and to attempt to take marine species recreationally. They must be licensed through the Department of Environmental Management. Current license fee is $25 for a vessel, and it's good for 2 years. What Article 1 does is increases these fees from $25 biennially to $100 annually for state residents. It also establishes a non-resident fee of $300 annually. These fees have not been changed since 1998. Additionally, it moves the renewal date from the end of February to the end of December, essentially aligning these licenses to the calendar year. Some other fees to discuss. Every vessel landing or dealing commercially in a marine species in the state must have a permit or license. A landing is to offload marine species harvested within or outside the state waters for sale, and dealing is bartering or trading in marine species. So the next slide shows the landing fees and the dealing fees, and the proposed resident and non-resident changes as shown here. Article 10 also establishes a multi-purpose vessel license. It enables vessel owners to have any operator engage in commercial fishing aboard their vessel. They're currently limited to those who already have a commercial fishing license. These become effective for FY 2023. There are a number of changes to licensing structure. Again, we've shown this here to you, here on the table, on the two-sided piece of paper I handed out, which also should be posted on the committee documents website. This is the same proposal, again, you heard last year about restructuring the licensing structure. And that there are standard resident or non-resident licenses that are further categorized by limited or unlimited sectors. It retains multi-purpose student and over 65 shell fishing licenses, and it assumes modern management techniques such as electronic reporting and quota monitoring. Massachusetts was used as the model for these fee amounts, and these are shown here. And again, there's quite a bit more detail provided if you're interested in a specific item. Article 10 also contains something you saw last year as well, and that is a shellfish dockside program. And this has to do with the Department of Health's job to analyze water samples collected from shellfish growing areas. It reports results to DEM for decisions on when to close shellfish or harvesting areas. This dates back to an issue with in 2016 and 2017 on closures of shellfishing areas, and DEM and Department of Health have worked together on contingency plans. The article authorizes the Director of the Department of Health to establish a dockside program to be established through rules and regulations, and includes the authority for a license fee. The article dedicates the fee revenues to program expenses, so you have the funding going into the general fund and then going out in terms of supporting 3 new positions, testing and health food specialists, and as well as providing funding for laboratory testing and monitoring activities. The last item we'll cover is the item that was that deals with the underground storage tank fund. This fund dates back to the mid-90s and is currently supported by a ½ cent on the gas tax, and the eligible uses include reimbursement for claims, including property or natural resource damages, investigation, remediation, or corrective action of activities at sites of a release. There were previous transfers in 2006 and 2008. And the fund was originally supported by a full cent on the gas tax. It was amended back in 2009 down to a ½ cent. The other half goes to the Intermodal Surface Transportation Fund. Now, the governor's budget submitted to you March 11th assumes the transfer of $1 million from that fund by the end of fiscal 22. The fund has an operating surplus and that would be retained. There would still be a balance at the end of this, $3.9 million with the transfer. The governor's budget amendment was submitted a couple days ago because the actual mechanism to do the transfer, which is typically a line in Article 1, was not included in the budget, and it's here in this handout for you with the governor's budget amendments. We've just put together for you a quick little recent history on prior balance and receipts into the fund, so you can see what I was talking about in terms of a year-end balance and the fact that current receipts are in excess of current needs. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you as usual, Sharon, for a good presentation. Are there any questions from the panel for Sharon on anything she covered? Leader Filippi, please. And could we make sure that Vice Chair Slater is...
Yes. Could I be recognized for my attendance and also for
yes.
the vote for further study?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, you got them all?
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Leader Filippi, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you, Sharon, for your presentation. On slide 13, we have in here that administrative penalties from the CRMC do not get a de novo repeal from Superior Court anymore. I think CRMC does a great job. The staff does a great job. I'm just concerned that maybe this is more of an issue for the Judiciary Committee. For the benefit of the committee, the way it works is that the executive director of CRMC notifies a citizen that they are subject to a fine. That citizen can then request an administrative hearing. The executive director, the same person issuing the fine, picks the hearing officer, and then the citizen goes before the hearing officer, and the hearing officer decides whether they should get a fine or not. The fines can be substantial. If you see the changes we're making here, they can be up to $50,000. And we've always, through our administrative processes, I feel tried to afford citizens due process, which is if an administrative agency is assessing you a fine, then you should be able to appeal that fine and get a new hearing, a fair hearing in front of Superior Court where all the facts come in. I question here whether it makes sense to give so much deference to an administrative agency and then not afford a citizen a de novo hearing in court. If you look, the hearing officer is picked by the same person who is assessing the fine. And I just think from a due process perspective, that's problematic. And this de novo section, I think, is maybe something that the Judiciary Committee should take up. It doesn't have a financial impact, and it really goes to due process rights, which our Judiciary Committee deals with. Not to say that this committee isn't capable to deal with it. I just have concerns from a due process perspective, giving so much deference to an administrative agency, any administrative agency, period, including CRMC, which works hard. So I just would like everyone to keep an eye on that. I really have a problem with that language. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, you're quite welcome. Did you have a question up to bone? Yes, okay. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, great.
Okay. Ladies first.
Up to bone.
No, ladies first.
Sharon?
Okay. We're back live.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee. Sharon, got my attention that in slide 7, slide 8 and 9, when the Department of DEM are referring to increasing fees, they only referring to Westerly. What was the rationality behind that?
So, I mean, I'll certainly let the administration speak to it, but as we point out, it's a very high percentage of the revenues comes from there and appears to come from out-of-state residents.
Okay, I'm just advocating for Rep. Bolsonaro here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're quite welcome. We're up to bone, please.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Chair. On slide 12, you mentioned that we don't really bring in a lot of money there.
Correct.
Do you know how much it is that we bring?
So $500 in 2020. In 2018, I think, was the 7,200, and then in 2019 might have been 4,200. The highest amount in recent years was 2,800.
Okay, and then the did the administration give a rationale
I
for?
believe it's meant to be a deterrent, but again, I think
not
that
a
was
lot
our
to deter.
understanding.
Yeah, there's not a lot to deter. Okay, and then on slide 16, while we're compared to other states, we're below. Would this increase that notion that we're not business friendly? The fact that everything's a lot more expensive here anyway because of the cost of doing business in a smaller state compared to these larger states who probably can spread their costs a bit. Do you think? All right. So basically, my question is, again, their rationale is just simply trying to be closer to our neighboring states, but other than that, I have like a million things going through my mind right now, trying to. That's their only rationale, right? Just trying to keep up with the other states.
Well, again, I'm not going to speak for the administration's only rationale. I would simply say that when you set fees in the statute and you leave them unchanged for any number of years or decades, the extent to which that fee was originally meant to support perhaps a regulatory function, over time, the assembly through the budget process or departments through a regulatory process may look at the reason they establish a fee. If it was to support a regulatory function, is it still supporting that function? There's any number of issues that should probably come up in a review like that, including, of course, cost of doing business.
All right, so obviously there are several like that. My last one will be on 25 and 29. Again, we're bringing it up to the fishing. We're trying to bring it up to par. I'm just afraid that we're going to push people away, okay? All right, that would be it. I think the rest I can reach out to the administration for. Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to check the screen to make sure that none of my colleagues who are not with us don't have a question before I ask my question. Rep. Quattrochi, you got a question, sir?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Uh-huh.
Hi, Sharon. So I have a question about the beach parking in Westerly, that proposal. So there has been controversy in the past, from what I remember, of out-of-state parking companies getting contracts for the parking. Is that still the case now?
I'm going to have to look and see which, we have had a multi-year contract, I believe, with the parking provider. I suspect the director of DEM can answer that before I look it up for you. But
Okay.
I don't remember offhand where it's located.
Right, so, and you wouldn't happen to know offhand how much we pay the parking companies?
I can get you that breakdown. I probably can get it to you before the end of the hearing.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that question, Rep. Okay, I do have a question for you, Sharon. And it references page 3, and I think it's slide 6 that you showed us. The Public Utilities Commission, I remember last year we talked about this ad infinitum, it seemed. And I just want to make sure I still understand that. It said, failing to file the emergency response plan, that's just the plan. It's $500 a day, it says there is no filing. How do I interpret that?
$500 for each day there is no filing.
Okay,
If you owe me a plan and you miss a day, it's $500.
until you get the plan
Kind of like a library
down.
book.
Yeah, I still owe library fines from 40 years ago. Okay. And then the next part of that was, and this was another one that we talked about a lot, fines for the violations and standards. It's up to $100,000 each day that the violation persists, but the maximum that can be charged is 7.5 million. And a couple of questions on that. One, are we mirroring our neighbors on this? I think we talked a lot about what other states, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, were doing in this regard when we were talking about raising these. So are we kind of close to what they are charging the same for violations in their states?
I don't recall the comparisons on this. I think the item you're thinking about was in the governor's budget last year, and this is different in some ways. So I think you may be thinking about, there was a whole section last year on penalties for other things.
Correct,
That is not
yeah.
part of this article.
Okay, then that's something I'll just ask the administration in terms of what that really entails, because I just want to make sure that, well, either we are or we not, comparing ourselves to our neighbors, and why those numbers. And, if a company knows that they're going to only have to pay 7.5 million, they may never turn a report in or something and just take it as a loss. Who knows? Okay, though, that's the only question I had on that. Okay, if there are no further questions from any members on the panel, I think what I'm going to do is go to Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. He has his bill 5204 that he had. I believe he wants to introduce that.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and committee members. So 5204, and you did get to hear some of the questions from the chairman on this particular bill. I've been introducing this bill in conjunction with Chairman Abney, with Chairwoman Ruggiero, and several other members for the last 3 years on behalf of former Lieutenant Governor, now Governor McKee. And what it would require is that every electric and national gas distribution company would be required by May 15th of next year, and annually thereafter to file an emergency response plan with the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers. The proposed legislation would essentially ensure that every investor-owned electric and gas distribution company in Rhode Island have in place an emergency preparation plan designed to bring about the prompt restoration of service in the event of a widespread outage occurring in a service area of the company. The Division of Public Utilities and Carriers would have the ability to seek amendments to the plan if they deem it necessarily to do so after reviewing the plan. The legislation itself is modeled after what's existing law in New York and Massachusetts, where National Grid currently operates. As noted, failure to act would result in a potential fine of $500 per day, and that would have to be paid by the utility, not by the ratepayers. So ultimately, if the utility failed to file their plan, they would have to come up with the money out of their particular investments. The legislation also ensures that during any type of an emergency, that the utility company would have a designated employee stationed at the emergency management agency to serve as a community liaison and to answer questions. And the key thing, in the event of an emergency situation, if the utility fails to follow the plan submitted to deal with the crisis, the utility could be denied all or part of the cost for recovery of the operations. The legislation sets the standards of performance for emergencies and restoration of service, and those penalties are an assessment of $100,000 per day for violations up to but not exceeding $7.5 million. Once again, this would be credited back to the ratepayers in a manner determined by the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers. As I said, this has been introduced on behalf of now Governor McKee. I think this makes great sense. Other states are already doing this, and we want to make sure that we have a plan in place and on file from every utility that they must follow this as well, so that for the health and safety and welfare of our constituents, we don't have future problems like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the sponsor on this before we proceed? That's a great explanation of it. Yes. Yes, I see you. Rep. Barrows?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I had a question for Chairman Kennedy. In terms of electric distribution companies, I mean, how many are there? I mean, they're at that size, and how much approximately would doing this plan or putting a plan like this would cost?
So to begin with, we know we have National Grid, which basically covers the footprint of the state of Rhode Island. There is the Pasco Utility District, but they're a not-for-profit utility. I don't believe that they would be covered under this. And again, most of the gas distribution in the state of Rhode Island is also covered by National Grid as well. The cost for doing this, I don't think we're talking a major amount of outlay by the utility company in order to basically provide to the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers what their plan would be in the event that we have a future issue like what took place on Aquidneck Island several years ago, where there didn't, at that point in time, seem to be a plan in place as to how they were going to address it. And the ramifications from that, to this day, I'm sure Chairwoman Ruggiero would probably tell you that she probably still has constituents who are still trying to get some of the money that they had to spend, in order to address what was happening at their homes or businesses and things such as that. So I don't think we're talking about a large outlay of money, and I don't think we're asking them to do anything that they wouldn't already be required to do in the footprint areas where they already operate in Massachusetts and New York.
No, thank you, Chairman. What I wanted to do is I like the bill, and I just wanted some clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Barrows. Rep. O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman, I have to be recognized as present, and I would like to be recognized as holding all bills and for further study also.
Thanks so much. You got that? Okay, the clerk got you. Yeah, Rep. Barris, I understand. I just want to remind everyone, we do have other administrators from the executive branch here. And I know that there's someone from the PUC that's on the list tonight as an invited guest. So if you want to hang around and re-ask that question or get a different perspective, that would be a good time to do so. But I think we're going to go into that section of what we're doing in just a moment. We just want to make sure we get the sponsor to introduce it from his perspective, and then we can drive on. So it's a great question.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome. Let's see, do I have anybody else that's out there? I don't see any other hands up before we move into the next phase. Okay.
Well, Chairman, I wanted to thank you and the committee members for hearing this bill, and if in fact the committee decides to move forward with this, I hope that, I know sometimes we pass these as standalone bills, and would love to see that happen as well, because again, I think this is a great piece of legislation that we should put into statute.
Thank you for your great advocacy. We'll take all of that into consideration. Appreciate that,
Thank
sir.
you.
Sure. Okay, the next portion of what we do so that people at home and here will understand is we do have invited guests from the executive branch who will give their perspective of the sections that Sharon talked about. And as I always say, if you've heard a question, so that we don't really have to repeat it, when you get ready to do your portion, if you could please answer that question if you can, that's helpful, and we don't have to keep asking the same questions over and over and over. I believe we have tonight Mr. Joseph Kadega, who is the Deputy Budget Officer for the OMB. I know you're out there, sir, and you heard most of the information that was passed. So if you want to make a comment on any of that before we get started, I would suggest you do so. And then, because the other members are there, I've got a list, but you do too, you could call on those persons to speak on the behalf of the parts of the articles that they're responsible for. And again, and then we have a list of people on the phones that we have to get to after that. So I would appreciate you making sure you get your point across, but in the most concise way you can, so we can get to the folks on the phone who are waiting also. So, Mr. Kadega, you're on.
Thank you very much, Chairman, members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify on various components of the budget related to the environment. To introduce myself, I am Joe Kadega, the Deputy Budget Officer. I'm glad to take any questions on the fiscal impact of proposals or arrange for any necessary follow-up. But I also want to introduce those members of the administration. Chairman, if you please, some of them are prepared to make some remarks tonight, and others are just available in case any technical questions come up on some of the more specialized subject areas that this section of the budget cover. First, we have Director Janet Coit of the Department of Environmental Management. She is prepared to present briefly tonight, and she's also probably well suited to address some of the questions that came up from Representatives Diaz, Tabone, and Quattrochi. She's joined by her CFO, Adam Brousseau, and several specialized members of the department, Ken Ayers, the Chief of Agriculture, Terry Gray, the Deputy Director for Environmental Protection, Jason McNamee, the Deputy Director for Natural Resources. We also have with us the Administrator and Associate Administrator from the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers, Linda George, the Administrator, and joined by Thomas Kogut, who'd be available for any questions and for those, for the PUC portion of the budget. And then finally, we have Kathy White joining us from the Department of Health and Environmental Food Specialist to speak to the dockside shellfish testing program, if any questions arise, and the Executive Director of CRMC, Jeff Willis, who can speak to that portion. With that, I'm glad to take any questions of a general nature, or else I will pass it along, Chairman, if you please, to the Director of DEM, Janet Quaid.
Thank you. It sounds like a good plan. I think we're ready to pass it on. I don't see any hands up anywhere on the screen or here, so Director Court.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for having me tonight to your hearing. I will make just a brief opening statement, very brief, and then try to answer the questions as you suggested. You have a number of budget articles in front of you today. Many of them are similar to what was in the budget last year. And in fact, one of the last hearings that I was at in person were on the budget articles where we talked about the commercial fishing license modernization. We had a number of representatives from the hunting and fishing community representing and testifying in support of increasing these fees that go back into the program. And we talked about our parks initiative. I'm so pleased that Governor McKee's proposed budget includes these articles again. Many of them are supported by the very stakeholders and users that benefit from our programs. You may well recall the independent third-party study we had of our parks system, and it endorsed what we already know, that we have a magnificent system of diverse places that attract over 9 million visits a year, that bring hundreds of millions of dollars into our economy, but that we aren't staffed up appropriately to really take care of them, that we didn't have sufficient capital funds, sufficient O&M funds year in and year out to take care of them. And so we launched a parks initiative. And part of that study found that our fees for the people that use our campgrounds and park at our beaches were very low compared to other places within Rhode Island and other states, and recommended that we increase those fees that are being paid by the patrons and the people that use these systems, and then that we invest that money back into the parks and beach system. So this is really the third year that we're working along those lines. And in each year, and again, Governor McKee did this, when we requested a fee increase, we are seeing that the parks budget is being increased by the similar amount of revenue that will be raised by the fee increase. So to address some of the questions, Representative Diaz, why Misquamicut? Well, the last couple years, 88% of the people who have gone to Misquamicut are coming from cars out of state. It's our biggest beach, it's the most crowded beach, and our relatively low parking fees are not in sync with the Westerly Town Beach, are not in sync with the private beaches there. So later in the hearing, you'll hear from Caswell Cook, who's the executive director of the Misquamicut Business Association. And last year, Representative Azzanaro actually testified in favor of increasing beach parking fees. So by increasing the daily fees at Misquamicut, we will see, which already brings in about 40% of the total revenue to the state. But when we increase those fees, we'll see the 90% of visitors almost from out of state paying additional money for a beautiful Rhode Island beach that will go back into our park system. It has the support of the local businesses, the support of the local officials, and we will effectively have out-of-state people paying to help us take better care of our entire system. The budget projects some increases to the daily rates, and as Sharon mentioned, actually 27% of the daily revenues go back to the town, the host communities, which helps them cover the costs of police and rescue and anything they might be responsible for related to our facilities. But that's a projection. We have to do a rulemaking, which has public input, of course, and we are poised to do that probably within the next couple of weeks, because our aim would be to get those daily fee increases in place by the time you complete the budget, or July 1st if that's later this year. So that was one question. The question about the vendor, we put out to bid at the close of the last contract the opportunity to run the beach parking, and we got 8 responses from vendors. 4 of them, including the only Rhode Island company that submitted a bid, were disqualified by purchasing by not having the correct paperwork and qualifications. So we don't control who bids. The company that did win, Laz, is based in Hartford, Connecticut. We put as part of their contract that they would try to hire all local folks, which makes sense for them anyway. You don't need to hire people from out of state to come to the beach every day and run the parking. But they won that bid because we were looking to really modernize the way we did this with license plate recognition, online sales. They agreed to invest almost $600,000 worth of capital equipment into the beach parking so it could be more modern and efficient. And did, I think, so they were selected as being the best company to run the operation. And I have to give them kudos. Last year was very chaotic. And we had our beach parking restricted and then opened. And, you know, it was with COVID a very difficult year. And they were very flexible and easy to work with. And the online sales went very well. The other question, I guess, was from our subcommittee chair, Representative Tobone. And I think the Sharon also said a lot of these fees are, he selected a few different fees, but a lot of them haven't been raised in a long time. When you look at the pesticide registration or the commercial fee, those are very big companies, Dow Chemical, Purina, and they pay a registration fee in every state. So when ours haven't been raised in 20 years and are lower than our neighboring states, we're just forgoing revenue that we need to put into our programs. It doesn't; those fees do not come into a restricted receipt account. They come into the general fund, as does the as does the budget for our agriculture division and our parks division from the general fund. And on the commercial fishing, you'll hear from some support from the industry. Again, those licenses are annual to fish and bring local food and jobs to Rhode Island, but from a public resource. And I think we really have support from the industry in raising them to put them on par with other states and then reinvesting the money in a more streamlined, more efficient, more logical licensing system and some of the modernization that we need here to bring our IT systems and other things up to speed. So I just want to commend my own team, and they're here tonight if you have specific questions, because we really do work hard with stakeholders and get a lot of public input when we put these budget articles together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer more questions.
Thank you very much. I believe that Rep. Tabone has another question. Okay, now, and then Rep. Ruggiero has one right after that.
Director, how are you?
Good evening.
It's great to see you. In regards to the questions you were answering that I asked earlier, my concern is there a way to graduate them over maybe a couple of years or a few years? I know they would forego revenue, but I'm always cautious of our ranking as a state when it comes to business friendliness. And although these larger companies are the ones who pay the registration fee, it gets passed on to the end user eventually. And so do we have a rough idea of what that change would be for the end user?
I was talking to, and Ken Ayers, our Chief of Agriculture, who you know well, is here tonight, so he may want to get more specific. But when it's a one-time annual registration fee of $200, $300 for all the products that they're selling across the state,
Okay.
Ken said it would be negligible if even noticed for the most part, as in terms of things being passed on to the consumer. Ken, do you want to speak more to that?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, these are large multinational companies who are used to paying registration fees. They register typically the same product in every state, and you know, but the Rhode Island raising them to comparable rates in other states, I don't think really is going to have an impact on the users of the state. It's I mean, you can do it gradually if you want to their set statute, but I really don't see, based upon the way that it all works, that there's going to be an impact on the users in Rhode Island.
Okay. No, and obviously, when we're receiving all this information, and you know, we had a long hearing yesterday and stuff, sometimes certain things blur. I appreciate the clarification, and more importantly, the people watching this could get clarity as well. Sometimes, we speak at a certain level and we forget that certain individuals who aren't in this business might miss certain things, as I just did. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I think, Rebel Giro, did you had a question for Director Court or?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And welcome, Director Coit. Nice to see you. Nice to see Ken Ayers again. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Article 10, it is a big overhaul of the commercial fishing license structure, as you mentioned. I mean, a major rewriting of our current laws, understandably, to modernize the system. But as you pointed out, and we all know, local seafood is a huge industry here in Rhode Island. I'm curious, what do you think will be the benefits and what will be the burdens to the men and the women in the Rhode Island fishing industry?
Thank you. Great to see you too. And I appreciate also what Representative Tabone said about making sure we're clear for folks who are listening. In that light, I'd like to ask Deputy Director Jason McNamee, who's really an expert on our fishing industry, to speak to that. We are also, on top of this budget article, you'll see in the RICAP portion of the budget, investing a lot of money into restoring the Port of Galilee. And I just wanted to plug, we'll probably have another hearing on that those infrastructure investments are really critical to maintaining the foundation for our seafood industry. There's Deputy Director Jason McNamee.
Thank you, Director Coit. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for the question, Representative. So I'll try and be fairly brief. I think one of the main benefits of the overhaul is we're really creating a much simpler program. The existing program, it has a lot of different endorsements, all sorts of different licenses, and so even the fishermen who are out there who have these licenses and the seafood processors who are then taking the licenses and taking their product, it's hard to know what is legal for them under the current license that they have, what's legal and what's not for them to be selling. And so this really simplifies it, makes it really easy to understand when they come to the dock with seafood products that they should be selling those products to that dealer. So it really simplifies the system for them. It also creates a system that allows for greater flexibility, and that's really a key for our seafood industry. Flexibility is so important for our fishermen in the face of climate change and shifting fish stocks. If they don't have flexibility and they're kind of, locked into certain species that they can fish for and others that they can't, they can lose out because those species are changing. We're getting more warmer water species up here, things like squid, and we don't have as many cold water species like cod. And so the system that we're trying to create with this overhaul allows greater flexibility, allows them to build their business in a way that makes sense for them. They can, upsize it or downsize it. They have that type of flexibility, and it will allow them to go after the species that are relevant for them at the current time. The cost recovery, that's going to help with the fisheries program at DEM. It's providing, in general, it provides match dollars for federal grants and allows the program to do needed research, and all of that can result, and doesn't always result in, but can result in greater quotas, more flexible management structures, things like that. And then the final thing I will hit is the party and charter licenses. That one's kind of a big jump, and we acknowledge that. But I wanted to offer that the original idea for that came from the industry. They are at a pretty significant disadvantage with regard to our neighboring states that have much higher party and charter license fees. So it's basically $12.50 a year to fish in our water. So New York fishermen coming into Rhode Island to do some party and charter fishing, which they do frequently. We have wonderful recreational fishing off our coast. They pay $12.50, but if we want to go and fish off of Montauk or Long Island, it's several $100s. So this gives them some parity, puts them on a more equal playing field with them, and it was generated from the industry. They're looking for that parity. So thanks, Representative. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. It's important to take care of our fishermen and fisherwomen because it's such a big industry in Rhode Island, and I thank you for what you're doing. How are you planning to communicate a lot of these fee changes and the modernization of the system? How will they find out about this?
Want me to keep going, Director Coy? Okay.
You are, yes, please. You're doing great.
Yep, thank you. So we've done a bunch of outreach already, and it's my hope that there are some folks here tonight that will offer some support as well. But we have a pretty robust public outreach system in fisheries. Some say it's too robust. Lots of meetings. In fact, there's one going on right now on another channel at 6. We do lots of outreach. We will have a regulatory process that will accompany this as well. So there'll be a full public hearing with regard to the companion regulations. And again, we've talked to a lot of the community already about this. Lots of the big associations, big seafood processors. So we've talked to them about it already. The word is out there. And we will supplement all of that with a full and rigorous public hearing process afterwards.
Great. So you've done your work. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Deputy McNamee and Director Coy.
Thank you. I think Rep. Diaz has a question for Director Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director Coit. I appreciate the answer about increasing taxes for the Misquamicut Beach, and based on the answer you gave it to me, I just have another question. Is there any plan to use part of the increased fees to keep the beaches clean and nice? Because I have information about some residents in Westerly that when people have or do any purchase, they receive a little plastic bag, and then they're not placing those in the right place, so ending in the water, and we have the fish and other animals ingesting those plastic bags, and that's just a big issue for environmental. So I want to know if you have any plan to use part of the fee to keep the beaches clean, and what is it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you also for raising that issue of plastics in the environment, particularly in the marine environment. Yes, that's exactly. So interestingly, Governor McKee, when he was Lieutenant Governor, together with Westerly officials and the Misquamicut Business Association, helped to promote the fact that we need to do more to pick up trash at all of our beaches, but it was a particular problem in Misquamicut. And so the additional funds that we were able to get through some fee increases went to hiring more seasonals who could pick up trash. We also stopped giving away at that beach, the plastic bags that we're using for our carry in, carry out. And we partnered with the Misquamicut Business Association to kind of pilot a project there, but it required additional staffing. We also put additional trash receptacles that were emptied more frequently and worked with the town on that. So it is a problem, and part of the increased fee funds, as you said, will go into increased staffing and other operational changes that will help us make sure that people dispose of trash properly and that we get rid of it on a regular basis at the beaches. We do have carry in, carry out in general at all of our parks and beaches, but at Misquamicut, and I don't know, I'm not going to say it's because it was out of state, folks. There's a lot going on down there, but had a particular problem, and we really needed additional receptacles for people to dispose of trash. So they are related in terms of the fee increases and the additional resources that will go towards keeping the beaches clean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Coit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of a great discussion. Mr. Codega, your next person up, please.
Sure, yes. Next, we have the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers, the Administrator, Linda George. She can provide any brief comments or else be available for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Abney. I want to thank Representative Kennedy, who gave a terrific, comprehensive summary of this bill. What I'd like to do is just highlight a few things and then, Chairman, answer your questions regarding penalties. You had a couple regarding the nature of the penalties and the amounts and comparisons with other states.
I did, thank you.
You're welcome. They're good questions. I get asked them a lot. So the division enthusiastically supports this budget article. As a ratepayer advocate, this legislation would provide the division with more effective regulatory tools to achieve our goals of ensuring that Rhode Islanders have safe, reliable, and cost-effective utility service. The Emergency Response Plans Act requires National Grid to plan better for service interruptions. It provides the division with more regulatory tools, and it puts Rhode Islanders on even footing with Massachusetts and New York, and also holds National Grid accountable when necessary. So the legislation has three components. The first is the annual restoration plans. That requires all electric and gas utilities to file with the division for the division's review and approval annual emergency response plans. The aim of the review is to ensure that the plans are adequate, reasonable, and cost-effective. Reviewing for cost-effectiveness is important. We don't want gold-plated plans that add marginal value at high cost. Now, 2, performance standards. How the utility implements the plan is where the standards come in. The legislation provides that the division will establish performance standards. We're going to do that in a docket. If this legislation passes, we'll do this in a docket and take public comment on what people want those performance standards to look like. The standards will focus on speed, efficiency, communications, and proper training. Communications would include communications, the company communicating with customers, first responders, municipalities, and state agencies, like the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency. The standards will also include reporting requirements on the company's restoration performance and the causes of the outage, and importantly, any lessons learned. This may lead to future modifications of the restoration plans. The third and final component is division investigations and penalties. The division may open an investigation to review the performance of a company in restoring service, and for violations of any standards found during that investigation, as as Sharon pointed out, the company can be fined up to $100,000 per violation with a cap of up to $7.5 million. This would be a new fine imposed just specifically regarding failure to perform reasonable and prompt utility service restoration. And why do we need this penalty? The division's current fining authority, which is a general fining authority, separate and apart from the one in this bill, is woefully inadequate. For example, the company was only fined $39,000 for the Aquidneck Island outage. That was the maximum penalty my agency could impose on the company. We are limited to $1,000 per violation per day. Now, I want to say too, Chairman, you asked about a comparison between Rhode Island and New York and Massachusetts. The penalties in this legislation are modest compared to the two states. In Massachusetts, the penalties are $250,000 per violation with a cap of $20 million. In New York, the penalty is $500,000 per violation with a cap based on a percent of the utility's gross operating revenue. It's a pretty big number, and it depends on the utility. Finally, as Sharon pointed out, the penalties, any fines flow back to ratepayers. They flow back to ratepayers as a refund to ratepayers for the utility's poor performance in restoring service. And as it's been stated, the fines would come out of the utility's profits. I'm happy to answer questions regarding the penalties or other provisions in this article.
Okay, thank you. I think that answered, my inquiry, my questions. Does anybody else on the panel have any questions of Ms. George at this time? I think you did a great presentation, took care of my questions, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kadegu, who's next for your team?
Sure. We have both Kathy White from the Department of Health and Environmental Food Specialist, as well as Jeff Willis, the Executive Director of CRMC. I don't think that either of them intend on making any remarks, but they are available for any questions.
Okay, I'll check and see. Are there any? Okay, Leader Felipe, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the panel. I always say that our environment is an economic and social treasure, so we really do appreciate the work that everyone does. Briefly, could someone on the panel discuss on page 90, line 22, the removal of de novo review in Superior Court for fines issued by CRMC through its administrative process? I'm just trying to understand the rationale and how we got here, please.
Chairman, if I may, Jeff Willis from the CRMC.
Yes.
Thank you, Rep. That provision is something that we just thought, because we have a hearing officer at the administrative level hearing the violation of the program, we felt that the appeal of that decision just should go up to the court to review our record. Honestly, if that is something that the committee would like further discussion on, I'm happy to have that discussion. The bill is really looking at the fine penalties that we are proposing that be higher, and I can go into those in detail, but the de novo section was more to have the administrative record just be accepted by the court, and then we can move on from that point.
Okay, I'll reach out offline then. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thanks for that question. Let's check and see if anybody else has any other questions on that. I think I'm fine with that. Okay. I think that concludes your portion of it. Mr. Kadeg, I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody that you have there, but I think we're pretty good for right now. And any other questions that we get, we can always call you up. We know where you are, and have a good sidebar on that. So.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, you're quite welcome, and thank you for all of the expertise, and thank you for the staff that helped our panel understand it. And as one of my members said, that also helps the public to understand what we're doing also. Okay, now what we're going to do, we have about a dozen people or so on our phone list, and this is our witness list. So here's what we ask is that when you come on as a witness, it's not a presentation time, but it is a time to please let us know whether you support one of the articles or whether you do not support that article, and your rationale for that. And we think that can be done in a couple of minutes or so. We try to make sure that we give everybody enough time to get their thoughts out, but as some nights we have several hundred people on, tonight we can be a little bit more lenient, but not a whole bunch more. Just tell us, why you support an article and why you don't, and that is what helps us in terms of our negotiations and our deliberations here. So what we'll do is we'll get you on the line and just give us your name, the article that you are calling about, and then why you support it or why you don't. Okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I be marked present and marked for holding all bills? Representative O.
Thank you, Rep. We appreciate that, Chairman Hull. Okay. Good afternoon. You're on House Finance. Is this Brian?
This is Brian.
Okay, Brian, you're on, please, for your comments.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Nappy and members of the committee. My name is Brian Moran, Director of Government Affairs for the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association. We represent convenience stores and gasoline retailers and businesses which supply them. NEXMA represents nearly 500 convenience stores and gas stations in Rhode Island, and we employ approximately 7,200 people. I'm here tonight to speak against House Bill 6122, Article 1, Section 19's proposed transfer of $1 million from the UST fund to the state controller. The proposed $1 million reappropriation from the UST fund represents a 25% cut to one of the most successful environmental programs in the state. This fund satisfies two important public purposes. First, it provides a reasonable lower-cost option to satisfy the U.S. EPA's Office of Underground Storage Tank requirement that tank owners must demonstrate financial responsibility should a tank leak. And two, it provides reimbursement to tank owners, including any third-party damages should a cleanup be required. Rhode Island's fund is one of the best managed in the nation because it consistently has adequate funds to reimburse claims in a timely manner. In a typical year, RIDEM disperses over $2 million, and since the program's inception in 1996, over 864 cleanups have been completed under this program, encompassing claims of over $50 million. This transfer, we're concerned, sets a dangerous precedent that may jeopardize the success of this program. Many states have seen raids like this erode their ability to reimburse claims and ultimately attract the scrutiny of U.S. EPA, causing them to question the viability of this important financial responsibility requirement. Lastly, we recognize that Governor McKee's budget was drafted before the recent American Rescue Plan became law, and under which Rhode Island is expected to receive $1.78 billion. We hope this new development will render this transfer unnecessary. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration on our concerns, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your thoughtful comments. We do appreciate that, sir. Okay, I see no questions from anyone, so thanks very much for your call.
You bet. Have a good evening.
Have a great one yourself. Okay.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Hello, you're on House Finance. Is this Caswell Cook?
This is, yes.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. As before, we ask you to be as brief and concise as you can, but get your point across. We know who you are now, and if you would tell us whether you support or not support one of the amendments, it would be quite helpful to us, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, as Executive Director of the Misquamicut Business Association for the last 20 years, and as a Westerly Town Councilor for the last 15, I think I'm in a good position to discuss the beach fee increases for Misquamicut. I'll just quickly say that it's been great to work with Governor McKee, who is in favor of this, obviously, and Director Coit. You know, Misquamicut is very unique from every other state beach. As Director Coit stated, 90% of the people are from out of state that come here. And we have different problems. We have different, it's a different beast than, say, the rest of the state beaches. So to have this specifically about Misquamicut, I think is very important. We did address the trash issues together, and with that comes, you know, an increase in what it costs. But what I'm here to say mostly is that to raise the rates at the Misquamicut State Beach is the most pro-business thing that the House could do. We were always beholden to the rates of the state beach. So if you picture Misquamicut, it's this huge parking lot of 2,700 cars, smack dab in the middle of 50 businesses that have another 2,000 or 3,000 parking spaces. And so the town has a public parking that's open to the public, and many businesses do. And so when the state beach price is so low, it undercuts all the businesses. A few years ago, Governor Chafee doubled all the beach fees, and we thought it was great down here because then all of a sudden the rest of us are the cheapest people on the beach. And then when they cut them in half, it severely undercut us. So we're looking for something that's, a more of a gradual increase. And I think what's in front of you right now is something that's very reasonable, a very pro-business for us. And I think that I just wanted to really get the point across that, we need the fee increases in order to be able to compete and stay in business down here with these other parking lots and so on. So I thank you for listening to me, and I hope you'll give consideration to increasing the fees at Misquamicut specifically.
Well, thank you for your comments, sir. They're really appreciative. Helps us in our deliberations.
Okay.
Thank you. Next caller. Hello, this is House Finances. Is this Morgan Beach?
Yes, this is.
Good. How are you doing? You can begin your testimony, please.
Thank you. Chair Abney and members of the committee, hello, my name is Morgan Beach, and I am representing the Pet Food Institute, the voice of U.S. cat and dog food manufacturers, testifying in opposition to Section 7, Article 2 on commercial fees of House Bill 6122. TFI opposes the proposed tax increase to commercial feed, which would increase the yearly registration fee from $60 per product to $100 per product. This amounts to a 67% tax increase, imposing a significant burden on pet food makers just to sell their products in Rhode Island. For comparison, Delaware's fee is $23 per product, and Pennsylvania's fee is $25 per product. The tax is applied to every product sold in the state, rather than every brand as implied. For every dog and cat food product on the shelf, there are multiple formulas, like chicken and beef, as well as recipes for pets on different sizes and ages, each of which must pay the fee, leaving pet food makers to pay, at a minimum, $1,600 per product. Our reading of the proposed bill indicates that fee revenues go directly to the Rhode Island General Fund, rather than funding commercial feed registrations. We see no detailed accounting of how the increased revenues will be used, nor does the bill provide any assurance that the increased fee revenue will only be used to support the feed control branch. Additionally, we have not received any communication that the Division of Agriculture needs additional funds for this program, nor have pet food makers experienced delays in registering their products. This increased tax will reduce product registrations in Rhode Island, which will limit consumer choices and impact households requiring unique diet formulations for their pets, likely forcing consumers to purchase from neighboring states in order to find their pets' products, further reducing pet food sales in Rhode Island brick-and-mortar stores in an already difficult economic time. We urge the committee to reject this unnecessary and burdensome tax increase, continuing with the current $60 commercial feed registration fee. Thank you for the opportunity to share our views, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your perspective, Morgan. We really appreciate that. I see no questions on the screen or here, so thanks for your testimony. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next caller, please. Do we have Michael Woods on?
Yes, sir.
Good. How you doing, Mike? This is Chairman Abney. You're on House Finance. You may proceed with your testimony, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Abney and members of the committee. My name is Michael Woods, and I'm here today representing the New England chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. As a North American conservation organization whose membership consists primarily of recreational hunters, anglers, and trappers, BHA advocates for access to public lands and waters and for science-based wildlife management to ensure healthy populations of fish and game continue to exist on the landscape. I live here in Rhode Island, and I hunt and fish here in Rhode Island. Each year, I buy licenses, tags, and stamps from the state so that I can enjoy the opportunity to pursue fish and game here in Rhode Island, and members of my group do too. The proposed fee increase that I'm here to speak in support of today in Article 7 will directly impact me by increasing my cost to participate in the activities that I love each year, and will increase the cost of participation for everyone who hunts, fishes, and traps here in Rhode Island. In my written testimony, I specifically listed the sections of Rhode Island general law that I support amending to increase fees. Generally speaking, these sections pertain to licenses, stamps, and tags that are purchased by recreational hunters, anglers, and trappers. The proposed fee increases are proportionally graduated over several years and are reasonable compared to the costs to buy similar licenses, tags, and stamps in other northeastern states. I wanted to also take a moment to talk about why we support the proposed increase in fees. As outdoorsmen and women, the members who I represent recognize that our outdoor pursuits rely on having healthy wildlife and wildlife habitat in our state, and having access to public lands and waters where we can hunt, fish, and trap. These resources are managed and protected by the state's Division of Fish and Wildlife using funds raised through the sale of licenses, tags, and fees to hunters, anglers, and trappers, and are bolstered using federal funds through programs like the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Programs, commonly referred to as Pittman-Robertson and Dingell-Johnson, which raise money through taxes on items primarily purchased by outdoorsmen and women, like firearms, ammunition, fishing equipment, and boats. These funding sources are often referred to as user pay, user benefit programs. This relationship is reflected in Rhode Island General Laws, Chapter 20-2-7, which outlines how proceeds from selling licenses, tags, and fees can be used by the Division of Fish and Wildlife, and ensures that money paid by hunters, anglers, and trappers is put to work to benefit these user groups. To be clear, our support for the proposed fee increases comes with the understanding that money raised will be used to benefit hunters, anglers, and trappers who choose to take to the field in our state, and to benefit the wildlife and habitats that our pursuits depend on. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Do we have any questions from the committee? Nope, no questions. Thank you very much and have a good night. Next up. Hello, you are on live with House Finance. If you could just introduce yourself and talk about your position for a minute or so. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Nicholas Grosso. Currently, I am chairman of the board for the Greater Sportsman's Club. We represent most of the hunting and fishing clubs and shooting clubs in the state of Rhode Island. We just wanted to testify today on Article 7, mostly with Chapter 20. The first part, Chapter 20-1-13, we do not support the part where it says these resolutions shall remain in effect not longer than 1 year. It looks like that line is being stricken. We do not support that. The primary reason is even if regulations are not changed every year, it's important for the sportsmen and women of Rhode Island to have a workshop and a regulations hearing. Again, even if there's nothing changed, it's an important part of the process. Chapter 20-2-15, 16, 17, 18, 37, 42, I'm sorry, up to 37 with all the increases. So we support this. We understand, as we testified last year, we were in support of this. We understand the license fee increases, all that money comes directly back to the hunting and fishing community. We actually drafted a bill several years ago. We never submitted it. So when DEM came up with this proposal and table of fee increases, we were definitely on board with it. Our organization has been in constant contact with our constituents, and we've been very supportive of this measure. Again, we understand where all the money is coming back into our community. The one area that we have a little bit of concern with is Chapter 20-2-42. We would like to see an amendment to this area. If you look at the rest of the increases, they're a little bit more significant than the increase you see on 20-2-42. This area deals with the trout stamp. As many of you are aware, if you read the press release recently from DEM, the trout stocking, even I understand due to COVID, has been altered a little bit, but the trout stocking program seems to have been diminished in the past 4 or 5 years. We want to make sure that the department is getting an increase that's actually going to make a change to the program that's going to be beneficial to them. So we feel that the increase on this particular area is actually a little bit is not enough. So we like to see the increase on this probably capped out around the $10 mark after the 3 steps. So I don't know what DEM's position is on it. I'm highly sure that nobody's going to refuse more money, but this is something that our organization has discussed heavily in the past week. I've also had conversations with people in DEM. We need a little bit more money there. That program needs to be increased a little bit. I just don't feel that increasing the overall amount of $1 is going to be adequate enough. And again, if you look at the rest of the raises, proportionally, they seem to be a little bit more on everything else. So just on 20-2-42, we'd like to see an amendment for that to be capped out at the $10 mark. Other than that, I'd just like to thank the committee for their time. I understand that this is a tough time, and I really miss testifying in person, but thank you for allowing us to call in and give testimony.
Well, I tell you what, you did a great job testifying remotely, so appreciate it.
I don't know what the name is, but I know exactly where it is.
All right, and then any questions for the witness? No questions? So next up.
Thank you.
I believe we have Brenda. Hello, you are on live with House Finance. If you could just introduce yourself and then talk about your position for a minute or so. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Brenda Jacob. I'm from West Greenwich, Rhode Island. I am the lobbyist for Rhode Island Revolver and Rifle Association, and I'm also the president of the Federated Rhode Island Sportsmen's Club. I am testifying today about Article 7, 20-1-13. I want to acknowledge that we are in support of the fee increases for the hunting and fishing, and we would also favor an increase on the trout stamp, a little bit more of an increase actually on the trout stamp, because with the three-step process with a cap of $11 in order to continue our trout stocking program, and that would also keep us in line with our neighboring states. We are concerned about striking the language on line 31 where it states these regulations shall remain in effect not longer than 1 year following the date of their effectiveness. We want to be sure that taking out this language does not eliminate the annual public workshop, because we feel that this workshop has been a really good opportunity to communicate with DEM and has fostered a great relationship with the hunters, anglers, and trappers and the department, and we want to be sure that this annual public workshop does stay in place so that we can keep our lines of communication open. I appreciate you letting me testify today and would be happy to answer any questions.
And we appreciate you taking the time to testify. Any questions? No questions. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you.
You got it. Next up we have Michael Roderick, I believe. Michael, you are on live with House Finance. If you just introduce yourself and talk about the position you're holding for a minute or so, and you go right ahead. Michael?
Yes.
You are on live, my friend.
All right. My name is Mike Roderick. I work for the seafood company.
Awesome. Go right ahead and just talk about your position for a minute or so.
The town dock in Point Judith, Rhode Island. I'm speaking in favor of Article 10. I'm speaking about in support of DEM's license increase in licensing fees and licensing restructure. The increase of fee will help fund the staff and acquire the resources that are necessary to carry out fishery monitoring and research that the Rhode Island fishery requires in order to have the healthy fish stock it needs to be successful. The extra funds will also allow the state to leverage federal funds to obtain grants, and which will also aid in research, monitoring, and the continuation of funding for reporting. The licensing restructure also drastically simplifies the system, which as a wholesale dealer will help us save time and effort when checking what vendors are eligible to land what species. This will be extremely helpful to all of us in the seafood industry throughout the state. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any questions? No questions? Thank you and have a good night, my friend. Next up, I believe we have Ryan Clark. Ryan, welcome to House Finance. If you could just introduce yourself and talk about your position for a minute or so, go right ahead.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. My name is Ryan Clark. I'm the CEO of the Town Dock. Our company has been in the port of Galilee for the last 40 years. We're one of the largest distributors of calamari in the country. And we buy and sell quite a bit of fish out of the port, and we interact with well over 100 fishermen, different vessels, anywhere from someone bringing in 50 pounds of fluke to someone with a trip of 50,000 pounds of squid. So we're fortunate to have a dynamic team to buy all kinds of species in the port. And if I could speak to Article 10, just a couple comments on Article 10. I think, first of all, the department at DEM's done a great job here engaging with the fishing community, fishermen, the dealers, and really the changes proposed here are very well thought out. From Jason McNamee to Dan Costa to the entire team over there, I think three things come to mind for us at Town Dock and myself. One, it's good for the fishermen. It really provides a lot of additional fishing flexibility for them. It's really, their licenses are simplified, and they have the opportunity to fish on different species. As the prices go up and down, they can easily change what they're targeting for their catch. Secondly, for the dealers, a number of dealers in the state of Rhode Island, it simplifies when we're buying fish from different fishermen. Sometimes they hold multiple licenses, and on a day in the summertime where you've got 50 people at your door with different fish, it's easier for the group and the team to work with the fishermen with these changes, where we'll know what they can catch, what they can't catch. The fishermen know that, and it provides just really true transparency across the board with these changes. And lastly, I think it's good for the department, good for the state. There's some rate increases in here. All that money will most likely stay within the state. I think the rates are reasonable. There has been an increase in a number of years, and along with the increase in the overarching benefits in this article, I think it's a good trade-off. It's kind of a win-win, where the state is certainly more in line with licensing fees with other states. Certainly an increase for fishermen and dealers. However, the trade-off on positives on what we get from the bill, I think more than support the increases, and those increases are at least in the fish sector are fairly mild. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the article.
Okay, thank you so much, Ryan. We really appreciate that, and keep up the good job in the world of fishery.
All right, appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, looks like we got one more guest on the line, and that is Rick. Rick, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, Rick. Please just state your position on the budget articles that you wish, for or against, in a few minutes, and we're done.
Okay, sounds good. Starting now?
Yes, sir. You can start now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the chance to weigh in on Article number 10, Fisheries Modernizing the Fishing Industry in Rhode Island. I'm speaking in support of a change to the fee for the party and charter vessel license. Current license fee is $25 over the course of 2 years. This would change that fee to $100 annually. And we support, I represent the Rhode Island Party and Charter Boat Association. I'm their president. And we have 60 members in our association that are all small business members located here in Rhode Island, and we operate charter fishing businesses. And we support the change in the license structure because we feel it brings a level of professionalism to our industry, and it would discourage folks that are kind of like part-time, just not really serious about it and using the industry for different reasons. So I just wanted to say that we support the change.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, thank you so much for your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I think we got a hold of a person. We don't like to miss anyone. I think Frederick is on the line now. Frederick?
Yes.
This you're on House Finance. Just please identify yourself, the article that you're speaking on, whether you're for or against, in a couple of minutes, and we'll listen.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Fred Matera. I'm a commercial fisherman for 40 years out of Point Judith, Rhode Island. I was owner captain of 84-foot freezer trawler Travis and Natalie. I'm a multi-purpose license holder since 1973 and president of Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation, conducting collaborative scientific research with DEM, URI, academia, and the fishing industry. Presently, I am executive director of the Commercial Fisheries Center of Rhode Island, representing 10 fishing associations. I am here to support the proposed Rhode Island DEM licensing structure. And these are my brief comments. One, I believe that streamlining the license price process will allow better access to all fisheries. Two, provide greater access and opportunity for fishermen with incentives for youth to buy into the fishery in the future. Three, align multi-purpose license to a vessel allows more flexibility for vessel owners to expand their pool of competent and reliable captains to land-restricted species, as well as an advantage for owners with multiple vessels. Four, streamline the licensing allows the dealers to acknowledge what species and specific quantities the fishermen can land. Five, it increases revenue. This will increase revenue, which is paramount for the Rhode Island DEM staff to perform critical and methodical data to manage fisheries by means of scientifically sound solutions. In addition, it addresses the extreme matters of offshore wind development to feather the apprehensions of impacts on the ecosystem. And finally, to monitor landings, revenue, and initiate research and filter data for mitigation. Number 6 would be additional revenue will allow Rhode Island DEM to compete for federal funding for improvements in port infrastructure through an in-kind match. 7, furthermore, added revenue will foster essential research collaboration with fisheries, academia, and neighboring states to monitor and examine climate change. And finally, developing priority categories for individuals with military service and individuals that have completed commercial fishing training programs delivers a much-needed pathway for the entrance, youth, into commercial fishing. Make it as sustainable for future generations. At our Commercial Fisheries Center, we'll be beginning our 5th year of our apprenticeship program to infuse youth into the commercial fishing. To date, we are fortunate to have a 60% retention rate and 100% retention with our military veterans. And finally, fishermen are an aging brotherhood. We're graybeards. License restructuring will eventually allow existing crew members and new entrants access to quota shares, providing necessary revenue to advance to become future vessel owners. I want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred, for your comments. I think we met. Didn't you testify here before in person last year? Yeah, I remember you. You have a very distinctive voice. Okay. Thanks for your comments. I don't see any questions.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome. Don't see any questions for him. I just want to do one thing before we go. We have an incredible 15-member panel that worked with us, and sometimes you can see us on television, sometimes not, but many are not here in studio, but they're still with us on Zoom. But I just want to say again, last night you could see how great these members stepped forward, and Rep. Diaz and Rep. Tabone went, I think, above and beyond the call of duty, in a sense, when they did a lot of interpreting for us, allowing citizens who could not speak English or didn't understand it, and allowing me, who does not understand Spanish, to understand what our constituents were saying to us. So I just wanted to give those two a shout out. I don't do that very often because we are a family, we are a team, but I think that was above and beyond the call of duty, and it really gives me a good heart to see representatives who are elected individuals who we take a lot of hits a lot of times, but most people are very hardworking. So I just want to certainly thank them for that. Okay, if there's no further questions, then I think that ends the business of the Finance Committee tonight. Thank you.
And I want to take